Why? It's not just that we lack a natural law for Benny's go home, or we lack a natural law for a book like this. It's that a book like this is positive, empirically verifiable evidence for an intelligent being, because messages only come from minds. The M in cosmos stands for the moral argument. If just one thing is morally wrong out there, like, for example, it's wrong to kill Jews, or it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to participate in a religious crusade, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no God, it's just your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. It's just your opinion against bin Laden's opinion. We all intuitively understand that certain things are objectively right and objectively wrong. As Dostoevsky said, he said, if there is no God, everything is permitted, in a novel he wrote. In fact, even Richard Dawkins admits on page 232 of his book, The God Delusion, he says, there are no objective morals without God. But we all intuitively know that certain things really are objectively wrong. It's not just my opinion that torturing babies for fun is wrong. It really is wrong. Now, I got to be very careful here, because Christopher may say that I'm saying he can't be moral. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying atheists can't be moral. I'm not saying atheists don't know morality. They know morality just like anybody else. I'm not saying anything about the behavior of atheists or religious people. I'm only saying that an atheist can't justify why a certain thing is objectively right or a certain thing is objectively wrong. Atheistic materialism can't provide a moral standard. Molecules have no authority to tell you what to do. They don't. I mean, if we're just overgrown germs with no ultimate purpose, why not kill or rape to get what you want? Why not? It seems to me that atheism has no way to deal with this objection. C.S. Lewis was an atheist at one point, and he thought evil disproved God until he realized that evil actually pointed to God, because evil pointed to good, and you wouldn't know good unless you knew God. In fact, here's what Lewis said. As an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? Bottom line, since objective moral values exist, God exists. The O in cosmos, how am I doing, Dr. Taylor?
5 minutes.
All right, I'm going up to 500 words a minute now. The O in cosmos stands for objectivity. Objectivity, particularly in the laws of logic, mathematics, and even science. In fact, this debate and any debate presupposes that there is an objective standard of truth out there that our minds can access and understand. Christopher says he's closer to that objective standard, and I'm saying, no, I'm closer to that objective standard. If there's no objective standard out there, what are we doing up here but emoting? But it doesn't seem to me like there can be an objective standard of truth, an immaterial standard in an atheistic worldview, because we're just molecules in motion. In fact, how do the laws of logic and reason itself exist if we are just molecules in motion? There are immaterial realities out there that we all know and we all understand. Christopher tries to make an argument, a logical argument against God. Well, where does he get logic from if we're just molecules in motion? If atheism is true, you have no grounds to believe it or anything else. Our thoughts are just chemical reactions in the brain. In fact, macroevolution doesn't help either, because macroevolution does not yield truth, it yields survivability. In fact, Dawkins points this out. He says, basically, that there's a gene or there's something going on chemically in us that makes more people believe in God. And you know what? When more people believe in God, they tend to survive better. Of course, Dawkins thinks that believing in God is false. So here's evolution trying to show people that they ought to believe in God, or that somehow gets them to believe in God, but the belief in God, according to him, is false. Evolution yields survivability, not truth. So if evolution is true, you ought not believe it. Even Darwin recognized this. It's called Darwin's doubt. He said, with me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which have been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Why should you believe in Darwinism if Darwinism is true? Your mind is just the result of lower animals. Also, the laws of mathematics. Science depends on the notion that the universe is rational and mathematical at all levels, that every effect has a cause. But how does rationality in mathematics arise from randomness? How do they come from matter? Doesn't seem to me there's an atheistic answer to this. Rationality, mathematics, and science itself are better explained by theism than atheism. The only reason we can do science is because there's an orderly world out there. Well, who ordered the world? Finally, the S in cosmos stands for a solitary life. I don't have time to present the evidence for the historicity of the New Testament documents and the resurrection. Perhaps we can get to that during the Q&A, or Christopher and I can debate that at a future point. Maybe we can, as I say, hint at it during the Q&A or get to a little bit of it. But I want to leave you to consider something about Jesus called the solitary life. I'll just end on this. It was written about 90 years ago. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant. He grew up in another village where he worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. Then for 3 years he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never had a family or owned a home. He never led an army. He never traveled 200 miles from the place where he was born. He did none of the things that usually accomplish greatness. He had no credentials but himself. He was only 33 when the tide of public opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies and went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for his garments, the only property he had on earth. And when he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 20 centuries have come and gone, and today he is the central figure of the human race. All the armies that ever marched, all the navies that ever sailed, all the parliaments that ever sat, all the kings that ever reigned put together have not affected humanity on this earth as much as that one solitary life. I need 1 minute. Is that okay?
48 seconds.
If there was no resurrection, how could this life be the most influential life of all time? Was it just because a bunch of pious Jews in Jerusalem inexplicably decided to chuck Judaism and fabricate a resurrection story so they could fulfill their dream of getting beaten, tortured, and killed? I don't see why they would do that. I think it takes more faith to believe that than to believe he actually rose from the dead. Now, you see, anything is more plausible than a miracle. The greatest miracle in the Bible is not the resurrection. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least believable. I'm sorry I'm out of time, but I did the best I could. Cosmos, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now our second speaker, Christopher Hitchens.
I have no local boy roots. I am a Navy brat, however. Commander Hitchens of Portsmouth. I'd like to assure you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, that isn't the best that Frank can do. He ended with that pious hope. He must indeed hope it isn't. I've seen him do better in his 20 minutes. He barely got his trousers off, as a matter of fact, before he had to sit down, because he didn't get beyond deism. I don't think he even intended much to get beyond deism. If there was a word atheist, it would describe me probably rather better than the vulgar word atheist does. I don't have a special word for saying why I don't believe in Santa Claus, for example, or why I don't believe in the tooth fairy, or why I don't believe in astrology. I don't need a special word for that. I assume, with me, you assume that these are fairy tales, man-made fables, either for the frightened